Hey, baseball fans, go yard with BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. All season long, we're offering top odds on your favorite home run bets, fast and convenient ways to play same-game parlays, special boosts, and so much more. From the first pitch to the game-winning fireworks, there are more ways than ever to supercharge your excitement. Whether you want to combine multiple bets for the chance at a bigger payout or place a live bet as the game unfolds, BetMGM has all the home run betting options you can need. Download the BetMGM app, head to the ballpark, and get your piece of the MLB action. BetMGM is an official partner of Major League Baseball. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. DC only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One.
Coming back to Las Vegas.
2 nights.
September 20th and 21st.
On one stage.
Streaming live only on Hulu.
A weekend full of superstar performances.
Never seen before collaborations.
And once-in-a-lifetime artist moments you'll have to see to believe.
Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com.
Don't miss
Big Sean. Camila Cabello. Doja Cat. Gwen Stefani. Hozier. Keith Urban. New Kids on the Block. Paramore. Shabuzi. The Black Crowes. Thomas Rhett. Victoria Monet.
and more.
Don't miss your chance to get tickets to our 2024 iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, right now, before they sell out.
At AXS.com. That's AXS.com.
Quick programming note at the top of this episode. I completely butchered Steven's name, and I am sorry about that in the intro. And by this time, the intro's all recorded, etc., etc. So I just kept it in there because I only mispronounced him once. But his name is Steven Christian. I know that now, and I apologize profusely to him. But yeah, Steven Christian from Anne Boleyn. You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode in which we dive deep into the world of punk, hardcore, indie rock, emo, metal, whatever it is you want to call it. That is what we discuss here because that's what I care about deeply. It guides my life. It's the North Star, as it were. Whenever I meet people and I find out that they have, even just a passing knowledge of this whole weirdo music scene, I am just enamored with them. And then I immediately dive in and be like, all right, how nerdy are we talking about? So anyways, this podcast is all about that, the recesses of subculture. And today is an awesome episode because I have Bart Balboa from Birds in Row. If you are unfamiliar with Birds in Row, they are a French hardcore screamo, I don't know, just aggressive music band. And I have paid attention to them for, 10 years or so. And I always thought they were cool, but it's nothing that really bowled me over. I was like, okay, good bands, but, am I following every move they make? No. But it wasn't until this last LP of theirs called Gris Klein that I just became obsessed with them, where I was like, dude, hearing where the band came from and then what they're doing now, I just love watching bands explore the sounds, grow up, play their instruments better, whatever it is that they're doing as they progress. Obviously, they're getting older, but anyways, Bart is a really charismatic and interesting dude. He's also a very successful tattoo artist over in France. And I felt very sophisticated and cultured speaking to him because obviously he was speaking with the French accent. And, us dumb Americans are always perplexed by people who are like, wow, you learned a whole different language just to communicate with us. And I asked some really dumb American questions. So, you'll have that to look forward to. But let's talk about the ways that you can support the show. For one, I will always respond to emails sent into 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Love to receive any and all feedback, whether it's music you like to share, guest ideas, all that sort of stuff. Inbox is open. You can also leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast page. It helps the algorithm trap all that info and then spit it out to the world to be like, you need to listen to this podcast. And then on top of that too, you can also leave a rating on Spotify if you listen to it on there. You can also follow this show along on YouTube. I publish the episodes there on a weekly basis. It's an easy way to interact because, that's a great algorithm for recommendation engines. I mean, how many rabbit holes that we've probably all been down on when it comes to YouTube. So love that. And there's a link in the show notes where you can follow along with that. And then also I've been doing weekly recommendations, which I'll dovetail on to in a moment. But there's a playlist in the show notes where you can follow along to all of the updates I put on there. Basically, I had a mission this year where I was like, I'm going to share a new piece of music I've tripped across. It doesn't have to be like new. It can be something from many years ago that I just discovered. But this week, I am thrilled to share this EP that just came out from this band this is what I love about the digital music ecosystem. So the band is called Outlander. Their new EP is called Orbit. They're from the UK. It's on Church Road Records. It's basically stuff that you would have heard come out of, Hydra Head, Neuro Recordings, just really heavy, dirty stuff, but like also sort of post-rocky in a way. I love this band. And honestly, forgot about them. It wasn't until the beautiful algorithm spit it out to me that they had a new EP. And then I was like, oh, I haven't heard this band before. And I go back and I'm like, oh no, I'm following them. And I listened to this EP that they put out in 2022, like religiously. And I just forgot about it. And that is, what happens in this day and age where we're trying to keep so much stuff in our brain. But anyways, the name of the band is Outlander. The EP is called Orbit. I wholeheartedly recommend all their music. If you like anything, heavy, thoughtful, pensive, 6-7 minute long songs, you will be dialed into what they're doing. And shout out to Church Road Records. I love what they do. They create such a cool atmosphere and vibe with the label, and they really, care about the music they put out. I'm not saying that other record labels don't care about it, but, when you get that nice curation where you're like, I'm going to listen to anything that this label does. Church Road is one of those labels. So anyways, that's what we got. Let's talk to Bart Balboa from Birds in Row. What a gent. Let's go. Truthfully, I really didn't embrace your band until the Gris Klein LP. I was very familiar with your band, as you had, like I mentioned, many mutual friends, very good friends with Adam from Graph Orlock. He was actually the first person to turn me on to you guys because he obviously put out your earlier stuff. But for me, I think what captured me about that particular LP is that I feel like you, whether this was true or not, it was embracing kind of everything that the band was kind of working towards. And I mean, the band has obviously existed for, over 10 years. For you, I guess here's the question. Is it gratifying for you to, I guess, watch the musical growth of the band to be able to get to a point where you can put out this LP that's like, oh yes, like, yes, I'm proud of all the stuff we put out, but like, this feels like we've, grown up and now we're adults playing music as opposed to, children or whatever.
Yeah, it's I'm sure, because you play in a band too. So like, it's always weird when you put up a new record. I have this feeling that every time I'm like, it's not good enough compared to what we put before because, the previous albums, they had a life. So you toured with them and people told you like what they liked in this record and how they connected to it. So I always feel like it's hard to put up something and be 100% proud of it, like on day one, because it feels like it doesn't exist yet. For me, like a record really exists when I start talking with people about like how they connected to it and how they feel about it. And so on the first day, usually I'm very, very anxious. It's really hard for me to be like, yeah, I love this record, like 100%. All I know is that that's something that I produced with my friends that looks like us on like this day, that's what as a band we look like. And the things that we wanted to do, like because obviously you don't want to put up the same record like every 4 years, you know. So that's all that I know, and I try to put my feelings on the side, on the way that I don't judge the record before I actually see the impact that it has on people, or like on us when we play it, because that's really what is important for me, I guess, you know, just playing the songs live, you know, feeling the things just the same way that you feel when you first compose them in the practice room. You know, this like special feeling that you are like three different persons, but you are doing something in common, and that it talks to the three of us in the same way. And so yeah, I'm never like, yeah, I'm super proud of what we released, and I think that's, you know, the record of like the of a band that is more mature or anything like that. I'm always unsure about what we're doing.
Which I mean, and that's definitely, to your point, the idea of you only understand that in the context of the way that people are interacting with your music. And I think that's really, because I mean, I know you've heard this statement before, but it's like, once you release your art out into the world, it's not yours anymore. And in the same way that I'm sure you as a tattoo artist, you can make that same connection where it's like, I am merely a vehicle to express whatever it is you want me to put on your body, in the same way that when I put out music, like that's, you know, that's me and my friends in a room, and, you know, getting to put out that music to the world. Now it's yours, and hopefully you like it. And if you don't, then, you know, that's your decision, and that's totally fine. But yeah, I like that idea of just you taking a beat to let it, you know, soak in, and being able to see how people react to the music.
Yeah, because I think there's like different levels on why you do art in general. You know, I've always thought that I was playing music just for myself because I needed to express something, because, you know, just the fact of playing those songs live, it's a way to let go of a lot of like energy and negativity and this kind of thing, and connecting to a community as well. But for like, I think since we started Birds in a Row, it was really, I really understood the importance of the community and what it taught me about my own music, like what's the reason why I do this, and or like why we do it as a band as well, and definitely I think it took over any expectations from myself, and it's true that it's really like, and I actually never made the parallel with tattoos, but like, you know, when I was an apprentice, I started like, when you do your first tattoos, you're super anxious. It's really hard, and you spend like 5 hours on a very tiny tattoo because you want it to be perfect, and it will never be perfect. And at some point, you realize that the importance is how the people feel with their tattoos, and that's the moment you know if you're succeeded or not. If they're happy with it, if they feel like this is something that they always wanted, or something that really expresses what they wanted to express, that's the goal you want to reach. And it's not like, me as an artist, I want to evolve that way in my career, so I want my design to look like this and blah blah blah. You know, that's not the most important thing for me in tattooing, and it's the same in music. Yeah, it's definitely like, the thing that is the most important is not when I listen to my own record and I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
Right.
We're the greatest band in the world. You know, it's more like, we play somewhere in the world, and they're like this one person that comes crying at the end of the show saying like they wanted to see us play for a long time, that our music helped them in a difficult time, something very emotional like this. And that for me, that's way more important than my own like ego, or I don't know how to say it, but that's definitely something more important.
Yeah. And I think you're right. Like there's two distinct differences between being proud of something you've done, and then, to your point, the ability to be like, we're the best band in the world. Like, you know, like there's ego in creating art, but it's like, you really have to strip away much of the ego, because you are so vulnerable by putting yourself out there. You're like, well, I care about what people think, but at the same time, like, that's just, you know, that's part of the bargain of being an artist.
Yeah. And also, like, with this, there's so many good bands now. How can you feel like you're the best band anyway?
Right.
You know, It's like I don't trust the hype for like, you know, telling me who's the best band or whatever, because I don't really think it that way, like in a competitive way or something like that. But you know, I think internet is very humbling. You know, when you spend your night like checking out, I don't know, Bandcamp, Spotify, whatever, and then you discover this one band you've never heard of, and you're like, what the fuck is this? This is so cool. And how you can, you know, have this kind of feeling listening to music and at the same time feel like you're the best, you know, and putting yourself like on top of everyone. That's something that is that I've always had a hard time understanding. You know, it's I don't know how to say, but it's I'm never, yeah, as I said, I'm always unsure about what we're doing and if it's the right thing, if it's good or not, and I only trust the people who come to our shows, who talk to us, and even though you still have an ego, because you need some ego to go on stage in front of people, you know.
Yep.
But still, I feel it's really weird when I see people being very, very sure of themselves, being like, we're the best fucking band and blah, blah, blah. Because those people exist, you know, and it's good for them. But I'm like, how can you be like this? I mean, like, there's so many good shit in the world, and that's something that you didn't produce. So how can you put yourself on top of everyone?
Well, so, and especially too, in the context of punk and hardcore, because, you know, when you're looking at that, you're just like, dude, I don't, like, you are not cool at all. Like, we are a weird subculture. Like, if you think you're the best band in the world in this subculture, like, you're actually not. Like, it's very small.
You know, when the day I realized that, because I've been enclosed in punk rock and hardcore for a long time since I'm a kid. So, you know, looking at bands like Converge, for example, I was like, that's the fucking best band. Like, you know, they are the masters, and I want to be that band one day. And the day I realized that we were in a very small scene is when I started talking about Converge to people, and they were all like, I've never heard of that band. Like, I don't know who that band is, like, literally. And I was like, but that's the most important band in my life. Like, how can you not know it, you know?
Yep.
And then I realized, yeah, that was a subculture, definitely.
Totally. Well, we'll address that a little bit later. But you yourself, were you, I presume you were born and raised in France, or where did you actually come up?
Yeah, I was born in Bayonne, which is France and not France. It's a part of France was called Basque Country. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with France, but it's like there are a lot of different spaces in France who have like very strong identity and cultures that are not necessarily French. And so I come from there, and I've been raised in Laval, where Berzinro is based, which is more like western part of France, next to Brittany, and yeah, it's a small town, like 50,000-60,000 inhabitants, so not big at all for France.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously most people think of, you know, Paris or, you know, Nice or whatever, like, as the destinations for tourists and stuff like that. When you're describing it to, you know, dumb Americans like me, is it that sort of rural upbringing where it's like, you know, farm life, like there's really just a city center and, you know, not much going on? Or is it a little bit more like what you would see in America as far as suburbs are concerned?
What I can tell is that the day we toured with Modern Life is War, who come from Marshalltown, Iowa, I discovered we had a lot in common. So if I have to give an example of what it would be to be, you know, raised in Laval, it would be the same than being raised in Marshalltown in Iowa, I guess. So it's definitely rural. Like the biggest company, like the main company here is a dairy company called Lactalis, which is one of the biggest company in the world in terms of like dairy products. So there are literally more cows than people living here. Laval is the main city, so it's still a city with a city center, but like, you know, it's not big at all. Like culturally, when we were kids, there were more shows than there is today, because like culturally there were like more things happening, I guess. But still, it was like I was actually raised not in Laval, but in a smaller town next to it. So I didn't have access to this. You know, Laval was like the city for me. So I had to go there if I wanted to see a show. but I think at that time I didn't even know what a show was really. And I think I watched my first punk rock show. I was like 14 or 15 maybe.
Okay.
But I started playing music. I was like 9 or something like that.
Got it. And
so yeah, rural.
Very rural, yes. What was your family structure like growing up? Like mom and dad in the house? Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have my two parents are still together. I have an elder brother who actually introduced me to music. So my parents would always listen to music. My dad was like a huge Bob Marley fan and like Dire Straits and this kind of like dad rock thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was a lot into U2 and some French singer, like singer-songwriter things. And music has always been part of my family. We would always listen to music. And one day, my brother made me listen to Nirvana when I was like 6 or 7, and it totally changed my life. So definitely like my closer family really got me into music, and I have the luck to have a family that is very supportive as well, like very loving,
Yep.
very loving and lovely too, and very supportive. So I'm that lucky guy that has nothing to complain about his family,
Yeah, which I think that is, even though there's a lot of arguments and things that you can get in with your parents when you start to get into this weird subculture, it's usually like, I think the thing that your experience, and I mean truthfully my experience and many other people's experiences, is the idea like when the parent is excited about seeing their kid excited, and it's like, even if they don't understand it, it's like, okay, well, as long as it's not harmful, like this is something I just have to support, because there's no way, like, can you only imagine if your, family or your parents were like, Bart, you can't go to shows, and be like, what do you mean? Of course I am. Like, you're going to go no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I never had, I don't know how you call it in English, but when you're a teenager and you have like this, fight with your parents, I've never had this era in my life. I've never lived this because I've always been doing my things in my, also like the fact that in my family there were some, like one of my uncle was a bassist, and he played in band, a little corner of the house in the corner of the world kind of. And my parents were always like, they trusted me. So that's something that I don't think that it was too scary for my parents really. They knew what it was, it's not, it doesn't mean that you are gonna, I don't know, go with the wrong people, take drugs or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that. So they were very trusting me a lot. The only thing was like, okay, you want to play music, but keep on studying. Keep on studying. Like, you have to have something in case of you don't make it out, or you don't make it in the music industry or whatever. Because at that point they thought I was interested in making it in the music industry. But
you're gonna, yeah, the idea, especially, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this when it's like you talk about, tours to your average civilian or what have you, they have no context for it. And you're just like, yeah, I got in a 15-passenger van and I was hanging out with my friends, and they were just like, you're not on a tour bus? Like, you're not trying to make it? And it's like, no, what does that mean?
Yeah, even more like when you tour Europe for the first time, because, in Europe, it's very, that's the normality to tour in squats and places are considered sometimes illegal, and so like most of the time we toured with Birds and Row in Europe were in those spaces, and that's something that people don't know and they don't understand necessarily. So they're like, wait, you mean like you're playing for like 3 drunk guys? Maybe you're like, you don't even have a stage or like anything like that. Everything is shitty. You don't get paid, blah, blah, blah. But then after like a couple tours, they realize that you're actually organized and you don't lose money anymore. And so they start being like, okay, maybe that's something that I don't understand, but you're right to do it.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead. Keep doing what you're doing. I guess it works, whatever that means. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you said with, Nirvana being your first band, or the first band that you got into that you felt like it was, something that you had never heard before. And I mean, honestly, like most of my knowledge about French hardcore and punk in general, I mean, it's very limited because obviously not a lot of bands have come out of there as far as making an impact here in the United States. It's, I mean, it's like, I remember how novel a band like Amanda Woodward was, where it was like, oh my gosh, like this is from France. And like here in America, we were just like, oh, like that's a novelty, And so when you started to go to your first shows, I presume most of it was just like local bands and French bands and maybe other bands from other countries just touring through there?
Yeah, basically locals. There was like this metal band called Homestel in Laval that were like kind of like the elder brothers for all the other bands. They would play this like metal hardcore shows and bring bands from outside, in France. Like they would have they actually like booked Gojira in Laval when we were kids before Gojira became Gojira, and so there was already like this example of people playing music and like living this culture and participating to this culture. My first like punk rock show per se was actually a band that was not famous, but like that has that had a big name in France, called Burning Heads, because they used to be like a skate punk band kind of, and they were on Burning Heart label.
Burning Heart, that's I remember that. Yeah. I remember that band name.
And so like they're still around, like they're still playing. And so my first like punk rock show was like seeing them play, and I remember like, because at that time you would discover bands through magazines because internet was not like a big thing, and so I remember seeing them in magazines, and people were like so stoked that, because like they had an era in their band that they would play like reggae dub music, and people were so stoked that they were coming back to punk rock, and so they had just put out this record called Taranto, which was like kind of like punk, melodic, and a bit dark sometimes. And so I was like listening to it a lot, and when I saw them play, I got to talk to them, and it made me realize like the proximity you can have with the artists you like in the scene. And I remember telling them that I had a band, and they were like, "Keep doing it," and blah blah, being very like encouraging, and it kind of like created a milestone in my head. Like the show was like in a shitty venue. There was not like that many people and stuff, but it's really like a milestone in my life. And the day that I got to play with them, I was like, whoa, I made it. And
right.
in my head, I made it because I played with my heroes. And so that was like my first show. There was like a small bar in Laval that was putting up a lot of shows at some point, but I didn't get to see this a lot because I was from a town next to it, and it was hard for me to reach Laval sometimes. And the moment when I started like going to the city, that's the moment where the bars like stopped putting up shows because of like cops like making it a nightmare for them to put up shows. So it was kind of like I missed an era that I wanted to enjoy, but I couldn't see it. And then it was just about traveling around with my friends to go catch up some shows here and there around the city, because the Laval is kind of like in the middle of a lot of different bigger cities, and where you could actually have access to that culture, but not anymore in our own city.
Yeah, you had to travel for it.
Yeah.
Oh, what's up, merch buyer? I didn't see you over there. Well, guess what? I got a really good idea for you. How about you go to rockabilia.com and you use this promo code 100 words or less, and it gets you 10% off your entire order. Now, I know I may be categorizing you as a merch buyer, and maybe you're like, merch curious. Well, how about you just go to that website, explore, and your Pandora's box will open, and like in a good way, because I know Pandora's box means bad things, like, chaos will ensue. But trust me, the only thing chaotic will be the amount of stuff you're going to put in your cart, right? Oh man, this is cheesy. I apologize. But regardless, Rockabilia sells officially licensed merch, all from bands all shapes and sizes, whether it's AC/DC, Metallica, Bob Marley, all the way down to, Bring Me the Horizon, Spirit Box. Like, they just got a lot of cool stuff, and you'll be able to find it all in one easy to navigate website. They ship from the Midwest here in the United States, and it gets to you lickety split, or maybe very fast. Lickety split. No one says that anymore. Why do I say that? But Rockabilia is a long, staunch supporter of this show, and I love them for that. So in turn, why don't you shop from them? Go to rockabilia.com because you'll get great stuff. And then you'll use the promo code 100 words or less, the number 100, and it pays for itself. I mean, well, sort of. It doesn't, like, you won't get it for free, but you'll get 10% off. And that's better than nothing. It's better than a sharp stick in the eye. Oh man, so many cliches in this ad. But rockabilia.com, have fun shopping and supporting independent music. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We're sitting here. It's like June, and you're like, where has the time gone? And everybody's like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. I got to accomplish all these other things. Take a moment. Focus on the things that obviously, for one, matter to you, but for two, look back. Be like, what have I done well? What have I done not so well? And maybe I can, ask some friends and family for some help. But where I have always gone to in regards to figuring out what I can do better, therapy. Therapy is an incredible tool at your arsenal that you can dip into. I've done it for my marriage. I've done it for myself personally. And I'm a huge advocate for what therapy can do for you, because it is a third party that's able to look at what you can do to improve your life and be a person to help you along in your journey. And so I think if you were thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and entirely suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and then boom, you're done. It's great. And then if you're not vibing with the therapist, you can switch it at no additional cost. So take a moment, reflect on the things you've done, reflect on the things you want to do, and visit betterhelp.com/Ray today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Ray. You mentioned in regards to, studies and school was obviously important to your parents. First of all, like what did they do as a profession? Like, was there hope that you were going to, carry on and do either what your mother and father did as far as work was concerned?
But my mom never had this expectations from me. She's like a social worker. She worked in like most of his career, she worked in a city center, like city hall, as a social worker. Like she was doing she had like a lot of work. Like she was working for like 5 people pretty much. But my father was a bit more like expecting something from me, because I embraced something that looked like his career. Like he's a computer engineer, computing engineer, okay. and that's like he actually is like the first person in France, I think, who brought computers to city halls. So he that's like his whole life, he really like he has known like computers since the beginning, like since their birth pretty much. So that's something that was very important for him. And giving access to this to different like small towns and stuff around. So in the same way, like serving other people. And I started like enjoying like computers and like coding and this kind of thing. And I started like doing small like websites on the family computer. And when I had to decide on what I wanted to do, I started like studying in like web design, web development, and this kind of thing, like sure. Multimedia. And the thing is that in Laval we have also like a school for like virtual reality that is very famous. Like that's one of the 2 biggest schools in the world, I think. So that's actually a big thing. And he was expecting me to go in like that direction, because also I was so interested in like video games and stuff that it made sense for him. But punk rock destroyed my life. Yep, punk rock arrived, and I was like, no, I want to do this. So I actually kept studying because I was waiting for our drummer at the time with my previous band, who was younger than me. I was waiting for him to reach that level in studies where it's, you're safe. And which I don't know what's the equivalent is in the US, but it's pretty much when you're 18, you have those exams who are called baccalaureate. And when you have your back, as we say, that's kind of like a symbol of like, okay, you're fine, we'll find a job, as if it was like something that is necessary to find a job, that's another discussion, but I was waiting for him to reach that point, and when he reached it, we went on tour, and actually broke up before our first European tour, and that's when we started Birds in Row, actually.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so that I love that interest in regards to, because I mean, you are at that age where, I mean, I think you're a little bit younger than me, like you're like mid to late 30s, maybe, right?
Yeah, 38.
Yeah, and so I think you and I are. I mean, I'm 43, and we're like that last generation that experienced, pre-internet and post-internet, but like just the advent of, online chat rooms, and like the fact you could have this world at your fingertips, especially when it came to punk and hardcore, and being like, I can go on the Revelation Records message board and like all these things, like, the Bridge 9 board or whatever. And so I like your interest in, being able to probably see these communities, especially video games as well. So were you primarily I guess a PC gamer, or were you doing, consoles and stuff like that?
Consoles. I was a big PlayStation fan.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but like I never got actually the computer I'm using right now is my first gaming computer, and I bought it like 4 years ago, I think 3 years ago. So, so I got late.
So you're still a gamer. Still a gamer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like more than ever. Like I think COVID really got me back into this old addiction.
It's so funny because once you have that in your life, it's so crazy because even though the controls may change and like certain, like obviously graphics and technology improves, it's so easy. Even if you haven't played a game in like 10 years to be like, oh, I can play Mario Kart again or whatever. You're like, I know that.
It's like using a bike, you could like not use a bike for like 4 years, but still when you take a bike one day for some reason, you will know how to use it. And it's the same for like games,
Yeah, totally. And so when you started to, because, Birds in Row, and I mean, you as a person, I know you are, I mean, the band is very staunchly, DIY, and you obviously have, political thoughts and feelings. And I imagine some of that, like, again, this is my ignorance of, the French punk and hardcore scene in general. Was there a lot of like political messages within the bands? I mean, I know Amanda Woodward, I mean, keep using them as an example, but like, that was obviously just, traditional screamo. So they weren't, I mean, they were talking about some political issues, but was that something that you were exposed to as well, that you gravitated towards?
Yeah, the thing in like France never had like a hardcore scene, like in the 80s or like 90s, like not as big as you would find like in any other country in Europe, I guess. And so we have a huge like punk scene that is more like alternative rock, alternative punk, and this scene has always been super political, but that's not something that I really enjoyed musically. So that was like an example of a band that I was always like, I don't want to be like those, like telling people what to think, like always like the only thing that they talk about is politics. And at that time I was only listening to like Blink 182 when I was a kid. So I was like, I don't understand, like, and then I discovered like bands like Rise Against and who were like playing almost the same kind of music, but had like a message. And I was like, whoa, that's actually very powerful, and really enjoyed it. And he put me in a direction where like politics were more important. And then after that, I actually like met other bands from France who were like super political, who were like hardcore bands that were playing music that I was discovering at the time, like, modern hardcore, like Comeback Kid, all the Go It Alone era, like all those bands.
The Rivalry
like
Records.
Revolver,
Yep.
Yeah, Revolver, Bridge 9. and there were like a couple bands in France who were playing this kind of music and actually also booking those bands, and they were super radical, like anarchists, and very like politics were like definitely at the forefront of what they were doing. And then I realized the importance of this, I guess, and so like that's kind of a shift where I was like, okay, I've always played music because I love music, and I love the feelings that you have listening to music and stuff. But actually, you can use also those feelings to project other like speeches, like important speeches, like maybe make people feel less lonely in the way they see the world. Because obviously, music sometimes makes you feel less lonely because you're like, oh, my girlfriend just broke up on me, so I'm gonna listen to a sad song of like some dude saying my girlfriend broke up on me too. So that's a thing. But there's also a lot of other emotions and feelings who are based on the fact that we don't feel like we belong to the society the way it's built, or like we don't understand like the political game, like, and how it's gonna improve our lives or the lives of the people around us, and those are like very strong feelings too. And you can actually connect the emotions that music makes you feel with, you know, a speech that says, I understand you, you know, I understand that you feel like you don't belong, and it's totally normal, and that's how we're gonna build a community together. And so that's a big shift in my life, where like I realized that like politics have always been around in my family. Like my parents would look at the, you know, like the news on TV and talk about politics, and like my godfather was a politician, and so he was always around, but I never really realized it until I started actually thinking about politics and talking about it with my parents, and mainly my mom, who is like a huge leftist.
Sure,
like
well, she's a social worker.
Leftist.
Yeah,
she's a social worker. She's always been like she's always been on the extreme left side of the political spectrum, like coming from a family who was like a unionist and communist, and so that's something that's always been around me. And I think, you know, I kind of like based into when I was a kid without realizing it, and when I started like, you know, seeing bands talking about topics that really resonated with me, probably because I had those conversations or like heard my parents have those kind of conversations, it really clicked with me, I guess, and that's the moment I really got more interested in politics, even though I don't consider myself like a militant or anything like that. It's just I like to think that that's the shift where I got into politics and started to care more about all of this and what I wanted to bring as a speech to the people who would listen to our band, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, you walking me through that, because I think it's incredibly important in my mind, because that's really what separates a lot of, you know, what you call mainstream music and the subculture that we, you know, are attracted to. I mean, I'll never forget, like when I got into that band Chokehold, where it's like, you know, one of their slogans or whatever, it was like, you know, you only have to listen to like music with a pulse. Like that's the only thing that like matters. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but, and I think that that's important. And even if it's, you know, something like you're talking about, like Rise Against, like there's such an incredibly important like, I find it so funny. I'm sure you've experienced this too, where it's like people that just like Rise Against, but they're like, oh, I don't agree with their politics. And I'm like, what are you even doing listening to that? Like, this is crazy that you're like, this band is so outspoken, and you're like, yeah, I just, you know, I wish they just, you know, stuck to their songs. And it's like, their songs are political. Well, this is crazy.
Yeah, and also it's like, how can you disconnect the emotions they bring into their music? How can you disconnect this from like their political background, the political speeches and stuff? Because it's like, you know, for me, it's always, I don't understand people who would listen to like, you know, fascist black metal, for example, and be like, yeah, you know, I dissociate the artist from the art. And you're like, how can you do that? Because literally this person wrote this very brutal and anti-human music because they're fucking Nazis.
Yep.
So how can you not see it, you know? Because there's a lot of reasons to hate people, and they choose the wrong reasons, I guess. And you're listening to what they have to say right now in a symbolic way or like whatever. And that I've never understood that kind of feeling when people tell us, you know, like, when we speak on stage and they're like, shut up and play, you're like, dude, like, you're literally watching a band that wants to say something and that says something in the songs too. And you tell me to shut up, you don't understand what's going on.
Right.
You don't understand why we are here. Like, I'm not saying we're saving the world, I'm just saying that we want to express something political and based on community and all that. And you're telling me shut up and play because I want my own pleasure of the day, It's kind of it's weird.
It is. Well, it's like yes, of course, there's a component of entertainment in everything that we do, but really, like you said, you're missing the point where it's like there is so much involved in these small, sweaty rooms that you can't just boil it down to like, oh, I'm just here for entertainment. It's like, I mean, yes, I guess you could, because hardcore and punk is arguably the most popular it ever has been. And so you're going to get people who aren't, well versed in what this whole thing means, but it doesn't mean that you can't get up there on stage and do it. Because arguably that's exactly the way that these kids are going to, find out about the, more politically charged or message oriented bands.
Yeah. And also, like, who does it harm when a band says stop racism, on stage?
Right. Totally.
Who does it harm? It's like, I'm not like doing a fucking Zig Heil on stage or whatever, like that's something you have the like deep right to say, fuck you, stop doing that. Like that's because obviously it's harmful and it's dangerous. But when a band is just talking about like love and respect and this kind of like very unharmful topics, like, why do you want them to stop? What does it say about you?
Yeah, exactly. That's an attack on you.
Yeah. So like, what are you doing here? Like, really?
Yep, for sure. This sounds like a really reductive question and sort of stupid, but I have to ask, like, you are, you are a very well-spoken individual in English. Where did you learn English? Was that because, that was like your elective subject in school, or where did you learn English?
Yeah, like so in France, you have to choose some like foreign languages to learn, basically 2 or 3. And it's not like in the US where you choose the topics you want to study or this kind of thing. It's more like you have a big package, and in this package you have the languages that you have to learn. And usually, depending on the school you're at, you have like the first language is usually either German and English or like Spanish and English.
Okay.
And then the second is the same, like either like Spanish or a lot of different reasons. Like the sounds are very different than our sounds. There's like also a kind of a shame, like, when you start like speaking English very well, or German. So usually you start with English, but it's very hard for French people to learn English. So I've always been good. I've always been good in English, also because I was always like watching, DVDs of like American bands and I don't know, listening to American and English music, and so the sounds were maybe more familiar for me. And then the day I really actually started like using English and learning English is when we went on tour. So I was already like a bit fluent, but I really learned on tour and like interacting with people, because obviously in Europe, we don't speak the same language with most of the other countries. So you have to use English to interact with people. And that's when like when we were on tour, like every 2 weeks, we were speaking English all the time. And like I also like had partners, like girlfriends who were like German, for example, and so we had to interact in English too. So that's the moment where like English entered my life for real. And when you start actually thinking in English, which is weird, it's or dreaming in English,
that's when it becomes very real.
Yeah.
Wait, you like heavy music too? Well, you're in the right place, because guess what? Not only does this podcast cover heavy music, but I work with companies like evilgreed.net to be able to bring you merch, vinyl, so much goodness from this amazing web store where it's got a very specific point of view. We're talking artistic heavy stuff, things from like metal and hardcore and doom and, I don't know, death metal, like so many subgenres, but the thing is they have a curated list of bands and record labels that they work with. So trust me in saying that if you like this show and you like the diversity of heavy stuff that we got going on here, you will absolutely love evilgreed.net, and you can shop to your heart's content. It ships from Berlin, Germany, but the exchange rate here in the United States is super advantageous for us right now. So that means it's not expensive. That's a little secret for you. I don't know why I'm whispering, because this is a secret. Not really, but that's why it's an advertisement. Evilgreed.net is the place to go. And you can order stuff from, Triple B, Flat Spot, Sargent House, all of these cool record labels, but then also specific band stores. Trust me in saying, when you go to that website, you will find at least 3 to 5 things you love. You'll put it in your cart. You'll support an independent business. You'll support this podcast, and then everybody wins. So evilgreed.net, thank you very much for your continued support.
Hey, baseball fans, go yard with BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. All season long, we're offering top odds on your favorite home run bets, fast and convenient ways to play same-game parlays, special boosts, and so much more. From the first pitch to the game-winning fireworks, there are more ways than ever to supercharge your excitement. Whether you want to combine multiple bets for the chance at a bigger payout or place a live bet as the game unfolds, BetMGM has all the home run betting options you can need. Download the BetMGM app, head to the ballpark, and get your piece of the MLB action. BetMGM is an official partner of Major League Baseball. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. DC only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
I like the articulation or the way that you're saying, like the comparison of English and French. Like, I think, in my experience, it's that idea of French being the superior language because it's far more poetic, beautiful, whatever you want to call it. I'm just, very overgeneralization here. And then like the American language is very, harsh, like all of the things that you can say about English. And so I could easily see where it's like, you want to keep it secret, that you're like, all right, I don't speak.
I think this is just people are super proud of their language in France. Like there's I want to say maybe there's a reason due to like the post-war occupation of like the American army, for example, or like British army in France, and maybe people rejected them for that, or I don't know. I have no fucking idea. Yeah. Maybe there's something that is that far away in history, but people are super proud of the language in the way that's one of the reasons why we don't sing in French, is that firstly, because we want everyone to understand what we say, and because most of our we knew that in this culture there is not a lot of future. Like at that time, there was not a lot of future in France for us as a screamo punk rock band, whatever. Yep. So we knew we were going to tour in Europe, so we wanted to talk to the people and we wanted them to understand what we were saying. But also because if let's say you are the Ramones, and you write a Ramones song in French, you suck, basically. It's like the simple words that like any punk rock band we use that are very powerful, because sometimes you just need to have like simple words to say simple things that are very like impactful and stuff. In French, it doesn't work. It really sounds like you're not making an effort. You have to be more poetic. Like, for example, Amanda Woodward was like one of the only French speaking band I would listen to, because the lyrics were like so metaphors, intricating into metaphors, into politics and stuff. Very complicated. Like, yeah. And so I think people are just like super proud of their language. And I remember having this conversation with one of my favorite band when I was a teenager called Uncommon Men from Mars. They are like French people, but like were born in DC, and like because it's like three brothers, a band of three brothers, and I remember like interviewing them, asking them why they dropped the only song they had in French, and they were like, because it sounded ridiculous, and people are so proud of the language in France that they were like, making fun of us kind of for this song, but it's actually the exact same lyrics that we have in English, but because it's in English, it sounds cooler.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's hilarious. When like you mentioned, when Birds and Rose started, you started to play shows outside of France and tour Europe and everything like that. There's something that happens with bands where, you start to notice people that are enjoying the band, even if it is like, oh, wow, we played in front of 20 people as opposed to 5 people last time. And then you start having to, quote unquote, take things seriously, where it's like, oh, we got paid, €100 instead of €50. Had you always, was that a side of the music business? And I'm using air quotes on that as well. Did you feel, I guess, ready to take that on as the band started to, grow and be able to, not like make a full living off of it, but be able to be like, all right, this is like a business now. I guess we have to treat it like that.
Not really. Like, so when we started Birds in Row, we were like really much into this, mood of like punk rock is not a job. Like, there's actually like a quote from there's like a French band that was very impactful on the French scene at the time that had t-shirts saying punk rock is not a job, we were really much into that and being like, okay, we have to do everything we want to do as a band before we get before we get 30, because basically after that we're screwed. We're gonna have to find a job, make a living, and this kind of thing. So everything we want to do, we have to do it right now, because it's never going to be a job for us, and it's going to be hard to manage like a band and a job at the same time, or whatever. And even though in France we are very lucky to have like a special like status when you're a musician, that basically like that's what we are now with Birds in Row, like as professional musician, is like you are paid when you're not playing music as if you were unemployed. Like when you lose your job and you get unemployment fare, or I don't know what to say, money like from the state, basically. And so we have this status that is like, if you play 42 shows who are declared, then the rest of the year you're fine. You have like a minimum wage, but you don't have to you don't have to bother too much, and which is crazy. Like I guess but for most of the American bands, when I talk about that, they're like, what the fuck? Like,
not to interrupt your train of thought, but I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think it is, I mean, Canada has something like this. Like basically every, first world country has this program that, I mean, yes, of course it's diminished over time, but yeah, America, it is like the most foreign idea of the fact, like, wait, you're going to pay this stupid punk rock band like minimum wage or what? Like it doesn't, like, we would never ever get that in any world. And so like, I love it. I mean, that's what, obviously it's like the entire black metal scene of Scandinavia. That's why it's like, Fenris from Dark Throne, like he's worked in a record store for like 20 years or whatever. He's never had to have a quote unquote job. And it's like, yeah, but anyways, I just love like the minimum standard of being like, you need to play this many shows and then you're considered a professional musician.
Yeah, I'm super, how'd you say?
Thankful, grateful, yeah.
No, yeah, of course, but also I really look up to the American bands who work so hard because, most of the bands I met, they were like so sure that was the way they wanted to live, being in a band, on tour and stuff, that they go through all this shit and sometimes for their whole career, because sometimes you just you don't make it and you have to play forever and not get paid well, and so you have to come back and be like a bartender or anything like that. I'm really like looking up to those people. Like it's really impressive for me. That's passion for sure.
Right.
And that's something that we've lived that way until like, I'd say 5 years ago, where it was like, I don't want it to be a job. I don't want to be paid for that. So I will become a tattoo artist on the side. So when I don't tour, I actually work as a tattoo artist, and our drummer at the time would work in factories and this kind of thing, for example. And it was very, very tiresome. So I know the feeling, of like not making money with your band but still like being passionate enough to keep on doing it. And so yeah, when we started like Birds in Row, it was no goal. We just wanted to play music and meet people and be part of the culture that we love. And the more we got people at shows, the luckier we felt. But at the same time, we were not like managing money or anything like that. It was more like, okay, can we pay the bills for the tour? That's cool. Okay, and now we maybe have a little bit of money on the side to like press merch for like print merch for the next tour or something like that, and so we can pay in advance or whatever. But it was always like, you know, very tight on money. So it was, yeah, I don't know. I never felt about building a career. I've never thought about it until very recently. I was always more like, I have to live this as long as I can, because we're super lucky that we actually have, like, you know, people being interested in what we're doing when we go to, I don't know, Slovakia or like there's like this American label who contacted us and we're like, what the fuck?
Right.
So it's you know, it's really like a kid on Christmas Day, but every day kind of. So I discovered so many things on tour, and I kind of felt like that was the retribution, like discovering a lot of things about, like, you know, politics and about the way we could like manage a project in general, like how we wanted, like deciding on how we wanted to be a band and all those kind of things. I kind of felt like that was the retribution that we had for all those years. It was not about money or anything like that.
Yep.
And but then you get old.
Right. Well, and to your point too, it's just the idea, like, you don't know where your band is going to go. Like, you're just operating off of instinct for so many years. And then the fact that, you know, now you have all of these other responsibilities and you're like, wait, I can still do the band as long as I, you know, am somewhat responsible on this side. Like, I'm going to keep doing that. And so, yeah, you just have more, yes, of course you have more responsibility, but then I think because you're a little bit older, you know how to approach it a little bit better than just, you know, a dumb 20-year-old being like, I don't care. It's like, well,
yeah, but
care.
Actually, it took me a bit of effort to you know, deconstruct the things that I had built in my head, like that the fact that it was okay to get paid to play this kind of music, that all the very like radical ideas that I had been taught were not necessarily right. You know, that if you are lucky enough to not beg for money, but just, you know, do your thing, and you have enough people at shows to cover your cost and this kind of thing, you should do it, you know, because you're like one of the luckiest people on earth, you know. Making your passion becoming like a job is like, I'd rather do that than work in a factory for sure, you know. So obviously I'm super grateful for all the people around me who made me change my mind about that.
Yeah.
Today.
Well, and that's, I am glad that you say that, because it does, like, all you get as you age, in my opinion, is perspective. And then you're able to balance, like, I'm not trading in who I was as a person when I was younger, but I just have a, you know, more holistic picture of how this can all work. And so, yes, like, I deserve, because I'm putting in work, you know, to get paid, whatever, 100 euros for this show because we drove, you know, this many hours or whatever. It's like, yes, like, that should be, you know, a thing that bands experience. And I'm glad that you were able to get that built up.
Yeah, and also, like, in the music industry, like the professional music industry, the artist is always the latest being paid and being, you know, like getting the retribution for their work. You know, that's just the way it works usually. And I kind of feel like, you know, sometimes the weird humility that we have as artists, being like, you know, I don't deserve being paid for that. You know, it's just like a shitty punk rock band and this kind of thing. It kind of goes in the same direction than the mainstream direction, where it's like, you know, you're just an artist. We are the ones making the money. You know, we are paying for your record. We are paying for the for like the press and all that. So we need to be the first ones to be paid. And then it makes you feel like your work is just not important as an artist. You know, like the things that you do are not the things that matter. The like marketing is more important than music. And I think it's very anti-DIY to think like that. So I kind of like changed my mind on that thing too, because I was like, actually, artist matters, and as much as like the audience matters, because we are all part of the community, and that we're all part of like what makes this work and what makes it beautiful. But you are the ones, you know, taking on your time to to create music. You are the one taking on your time to book your own tours when you're a DIY band. You are the one driving overnight because you have like a fucking 10-hour drive to do. So that's all you putting up the work, and you need to acknowledge the fact that, you know, if someone's got to get paid because there's money involved in all this, it's got to be you, you know, priorly, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. A few last things I wanted to hit on was, I know tattooing has obviously been a big part of your life for better part, I mean, about 10 years, or have you done it shorter than that?
No, like 11 years now.
Okay. And that seems, I mean, I know a lot of people that are attached to punk and hardcore, like, end up either getting tattoos or obviously being a tattoo artist themselves. How did you get pulled in that direction? Was it just something that was interesting and you started to apprentice and then you liked it?
There's no one in my family who was tattooed at all. So I had no, you know, I had no like influence, from outside of my world. I don't know. But I was, when I discovered like punk rock, all the bands were like heavily tattooed. Like I remember like watching the Distillers, like I had like different like posters of the Distillers on my wall, and they were all super tattooed. Like Blink-182 were super tattooed. Most of the bands, like hardcore bands, are super tattooed. Like Jake Banan is like super, like heavily tattooed.
Yep.
And so I think it's just, you know, part like of the aesthetic that I embraced, and I didn't think about it as a culture of its own. I was just like, you know, it's a punk rock thing being tattooed for me. I didn't realize that other people were tattooed as well. And one day, one of my friends got a shitty tattoo from like the shitty tattoo artist around here, and I was like, okay, maybe that's not for me. You know, like I looked at it, I was like, that's not cool. I don't want to have this like ugly thing on me.
Right.
But then actually, another tattoo artist arrived in town, a woman, and she started like tattooing the guitar player of my band, and we became friends, and we ended up like hanging out all the time together. Like when I was not on tour, I would be at the shop, you know, just hanging out and discovering this whole culture. We would go to like tattoo conventions together, and at some point, people around me made me realize that maybe that was like a job for me, because I was always like drawing like flyers, merch, artwork for bands. Not I was not very good, but I was very involved in like drawing for bands and stuff. And I was always like hanging around in this like tattoo culture as well. And people told me like, why don't you become a tattoo artist? Because you don't want to live from music, so maybe you want to have a job that is not, you know, shitty on the side. So why don't you do that? And I didn't realize that's something that I could do. So I started like talking with my friend, like the tattoo artist friend, and I was like, I know you don't want to get, you know, you don't want to have an apprentice with you, but I really want to learn that job because I don't think I can do anything else really. Like it's hard for me. Like at that time I was like, you know, doing like web development and like designs for like different companies, and it was like I hate it. Like I hate the feeling of working for a company, and you know, like I don't recognize myself in this at all. So it was hard for me to just like, you know, find a job in this. So I had definitely no job. I was just going on tour and living with my parents. And so I told her like, that's the only job I picture myself doing. And she was like, oh, fuck you. Like, I don't want to have an apprentice, but because it's you, I have to do it, I guess. And she was like, when do you want to start? I was like, tomorrow. I don't know. And she was like, okay. And the next day I arrived late and she fucking like punched me. and that's how my apprenticeship started. And now it's like, I definitely feel like that was, you know, it made total sense. All like, you know, the fact that punk rock and tattoos are so I don't know how to say, like they come together. You know, that's two cultures that are very like intricated, and yeah, it's just the fact that it's art as well. Something that I'm like my own boss. And I have a special relationship with the customers as well, where like you start to become friends when you tattoo like someone, like, you know, twice or like 3 times or whatever. And that's something that I can recognize myself into, because that's what I do with music as well. Like when we go on tour and we see the same faces, you're starting, you become friends with the people who come to your shows. And that's the same thing that I have with tattoos. So it totally makes sense now. But at that time, I didn't know.
Of course. No, I really like that connection to, I do think there's something that is so important about people that are creating art, whatever it may be, to have something that roots them to, for lack of a better term, like real people or the real world. And like, even if it is, just working at a bagel shop or whatever in between tours, it's something about that gives you the inspiration to be able to, create more art, and like you having these relationships that with people that are, sometimes not even remotely connected to punk or hardcore, that gets you, interesting experiences, stories, like all that stuff that just like feeds into that. Because I think you've listened to bands for as long as I have, where it's like, sometimes you see bands get into that third or fourth record where it's like, 90% of the record's about tour. And you're just like, well, this is kind of like, I appreciate it because I've toured before, but I'm also like, I don't want to hear about that. And does everybody else want to?
Yeah, it's kind of the risk when you become a professional musician, I guess, or like when your life is only about touring. Like, what are you going to talk about, and how are you going to be able to connect with other people? Because I felt that on the very first time we went on tour with Birds in Row, where it was like a 3 weeks tour in Europe, like a very tiresome tour, and we came back and we were trying to explain to the people what we went through, and no one understood, and I really felt like kind of like rejected from my own friends at that time, where I was like, okay, I choose like a living path. On tour, you have to be part of the society that is around you. You have to work with people who actually are not band members. You have to interact with them. And I'm not parallel to other people that I don't see the connection. I'm not very good at being social in general, but tattoos really help me to do that, because I have like, every day I tattoo someone, and it's someone different with like a different life, and we can like, share our own experiences of life. And it helps me connect to those people, and also to the fact to have like a regular job, even though even like tattooing is not like a regular job. I guess it's still something based on like passion and art, and it's very different than working in a bank or working as a bartender or anything like that. I guess I've never done those jobs, but that's my guess. But yeah, I remember having this conversation with Jake from Converge, because I was interviewing him for a documentary that we never released, and we were talking about this, and it was like, yeah, like what are those like what are you gonna how are you gonna connect with your own audience if you don't talk about their life, and if you don't have the same life than them, or like how can you appreciate what they're going through if you always on tour, like like loading your ego every night with like hundreds of people telling you you're the best band in the world or whatever. It's like, it's not real. It's not real life in a way. It's you can't just, as you said, like complain about, oh, this is a song about the 10-hour drive we had last time in Midwest. It's like, who cares? Like, it's shitty. It's shitty to do this, to drive for 10 hours. It's like, it's really shitty, but that's not what people need to hear, really, I guess.
Yeah. Well, to answer your question specifically, all you do is just become very generic. Like it's easy to, speak in very broad terms. And that's what, some of the largest bands and artists do, because that's what will connect with the most people. But yeah, when you are in this weirdo subculture, like there has to be an element of, you speaking truth to either your experience or truth to power, or whatever your message is. And yeah, when you're disconnected from it, you're only going to just sing about these, experiences of being like, oh yes, like, I was on tour. It's like, okay, great. We'll move on. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Have you experienced this awkward feeling where you come back from a tour and you start, making like those tour jokes to the people, like your family or your friends, and no one laughs, no one understands, and you're like, okay, that's like two different lives. They're like very separated, you know.
It's
everything that happens in the van and stuff. It cannot translate to the outside world, really.
No, my wife always joked with me every time I returned from tour. She would give me a good 2 or 3 day grace period to where I could like get back into, you know, normal life, because she's like, yeah, you just are incredibly selfish. Like, just, you know, yeah, you're making stupid jokes, and like, you just don't, you know, because that way of life is so different than what we all experience normally. And so, yeah, she gave, you definitely need a few days to, you know, come down from whatever tour you have done.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we usually call the post-tour depression here.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's really like, you feel like, what do you mean? Like, I'm going to the store and no one is like clapping in their hands when I arrive. What's going on? Like, what's wrong with people?
Totally. Or you don't have to be like, wait, we're going shopping and all, you know, 3, 4, 5 members of our touring crew are going with me. Like, I'm actually alone doing this. This is weird. Yeah. When you first started, well, not even when you first started, but like touring in the US, like you have briefly mentioned before, is so drastically different than touring in Europe, touring in basically anywhere else in the world. What was, and I know this kind of is a cliched question, but I'm just always curious, you know, what was so surprising to you about touring the States? Like, even, you know, your most recent stuff that you did in the States, like, is there anything that kind of stands out as being like, this is so weird you guys do it this way?
The basement shows, for example, that's something that we don't do much in Europe. You know, playing in someone's house, we don't do that much, really. Like if it's like a DIY spot, it's usually like a squat, or like a place that still looks like a venue, and it's not like you're playing next to the washing machine, you know. And which is not, yeah, like, I appreciated that, really. It's really cool. I don't know, for me, what was like weird is that you do long drives and it's still the same population. You do like a 10-hour drive and you're still in the US, you know, and people have the same references, they have the same language, probably the same architecture as well. Even though obviously like East Coast versus West Coast, you know, it's very different, but it takes a lot of time to discover, you know, the specificities of every state and this kind of thing. For like a dumb European point of view, it's like, oh, you all have Walmart everywhere, so it's the same country.
Yep.
and that's something that is kind of weird, because also like you experience different seasons when you do a full US tour, you know, playing like when you start in Boston and like, I don't know, 2 weeks after that you're in California, it's really different. It's like way more sunny and way more warm, and then you go in the deserts in the south, and there like so many different landscapes and weathers and stuff, but you're still in the same country.
Right.
And when you're used to touring in Europe, you know, it's like, you know that Poland is going to be colder than Spain. That's normal, but you don't think about it that way when you think about the US. For you, it's just the same country, and so it's really, really different. But yeah, in terms of like what people do differently, maybe the fact that you get no food and no place to sleep.
Yes, the most simple, basic things that you Europeans take care of for bands when they come over there, but then when you come over here, it's like what? Like
that's harsh.
Oh.
Yeah. And you know when someone is like, oh, you guys, I'm the promoter. You sleep at my place tonight, and we'll have food after the show. And you're like, when did you tour in Europe? Because that's the only reason why you do it that way. It's because you went on tour in Europe and you experienced something that you were like, oh, okay, actually we can do it that way. It's actually cooler as a band, you know, to arrive and you already know where you're gonna sleep, and you already know there's gonna be food on the table as well. And so usually when the promoter is like treating you that like this, it's like, there's like 99% chance that it's a band member who toured in Europe like some month ago.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And but you have to embrace the difference of cultures as well. You know, it's it gives a lot of like new stories of like sleeping in the van or like shitty motels, this kind of thing. You know, but I have to say it's way more tiresome. Like we toured a lot in the US on the not Gricklin, but the previous record, We Already Lost the World.
Yep.
We did like 3 tours in 1 year, and it was too much. Really, like the last tour we're so fucked up after this tour. It was really really hard.
Yeah.
Not complaining, like, you know, being like,
Yeah.
It's just that, like, it was very very hard to manage to do all this in the same year. So that's why I respect so much American bands for what they do, because I know that it's a hard work. You know, you have to tour all the time in the US. There's so many bands. Like, I know that the bands that come in Europe, they're usually just a fraction of the American bands that you have touring on the American soil. You know.
Yep.
So I respect it a lot. You know, watching all those bands do like 190 shows a year.
Totally.
in those conditions, you're like, whoa, you must love Taco Bell.
Totally. You're like we can play 60 shows a year, okay, guys? That's all that we could do.
But, you know, like the first time we went in the US, it was kind of a dream come true for us. You know, I remember like talking about it in a fanzine in France, saying that I was surprised that we arrived in the US, and after 2 days, no cars exploded, because it all looked like, you know, the movies that I'm used to watch since I am a kid, you know. And so I was like, what do you mean there's no one shooting, or like there's no cars exploding everywhere? Because that's what I'm familiar to when I watch movies, you know. And so that was kind of like a trait of humor, but in the same way, I'm like, it's weird to arrive to a new country, but you're so familiar with the culture and the architecture and the language and stuff. It's kind of like, it's a new country, but not that new for you. And so you already have the codes, and the fact that sometimes the bartender plays in one of your favorite bands, you know, it's like something that I don't experience much in Europe. You know, you're just like, after your show, and the guy is like, oh, nice set, and oh, you come from France? I toured there with my band, and you ask what the band is, and you're like, what the fuck? You play in this fucking sick band? What? And that's something that is very particular, I think, in the US, is that we listen to so many American bands that there's a good chance that when you go to whatever, like, vegan restaurant or whatever bar, there's like probably like one of those people working there is part of a band that you like, or you have heard of at some point. So that's something that I don't experience much in Europe. But yeah, so like the first tours, you're like, I want to live in California. And then your stories of like, oh, you know, when I broke my legs, I'm still paying for that. And I'm like, I don't want to live in California anymore.
Exactly. That whole, we don't take care of our citizens thing, you know, that's a big turning off, you know, for us in America. The last thing I want to hit on, and this may be pretty random, but I know initially when you guys, you know, first started to come out and play, there was, you know, there was a shroud of mystery. Like, you guys did not reveal your names and your, you know, mystery identity, as it were. What made you decide to be like, oh, we can step out beyond that because, you know, that's not as important as it was when we started? Or what was your mentality as you started to evolve that train of thought?
Because we toured for like 15 years, people know our faces, you know, and I think we made our points for all those years. It's like when we started as a band, we really, you know, sit around a table and we're like, what band do we want to be? What do we want to propose to people? And so that's when you start talking about the band name and the logo, if you want, or like, what do you want to talk about? And for us, the way we wanted to be a band was very influenced by the DIY scene in general, and so we were like, what's interesting in the DIY scene are the alternative, like the different options it proposed compared to like the more like commercial bands that you can see, and so we started talking about, do we want to do music videos? Do we want to have like you know, photographs, like band promo pictures or this kind of thing? Should we put our names or not? And very quickly we were like, what we want to put in the forefront is our music. That's the most important thing. So nothing else should, you know, put some kind of code on this. You know, there shouldn't be anything like blocking the access to the music and the speech first. And sometimes we feel like this like boys band attitude is getting in the way of the real point of this music. So we didn't want to have like those band pictures where you're like on the fucking stairs, like, posing and like doing like, I don't know, like weird shit with your hands. And also like showing our names. What's the point? Like, what's the point in knowing that the bassist is called Pierre? What is it gonna change to your life to know that the bassist is called Pierre? Whatever. And so we were like, there's different ways to do that. Either you just don't give the information, or you do it in a mysterious way where it actually makes people think about why you do that. So we decided to crop our faces on pictures. So like people would be like, why do you crop your faces on pictures? Because we don't want to be a boys band. And that's when you start the conversation about why is it so important to know how like the musicians look like and what are their names and this kind of thing, when in this scene the most important is the community and the sound in general, like the music. So it actually worked well because we, in every single interviews, people like started talking about that. And so that's something we did for this. We did the same thing with the merch, like where like since the beginning of the band, the merch is based on donation, so there's no price on the merch, and people decide what they want to pay. And he really helped us start a conversation with like, like in interviews or like just the audience in general about what's the importance of merch for a band, like what's the place of merch in our scene. Is it because it's cool to have like a Black Flag t-shirt, or is it cool to just give money to a band so they can actually go to the next shows and pay for all the fees and stuff like that? So that's the way we functioned at the band for a long time, and we still try to do like this. And for us, like cropping our faces on photograph, we're like, I think we made our point with that, and people don't glorify us or anything like that. Like we don't feel like we're on pedestals as human beings, so it's cool. We don't have to do the effort of asking to the photograph to not show our face and this kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think you answered it perfectly. We're like, we've existed for 15 years. People know what we look like. We've made our point. Like people, I mean,
we played like 1,000 shows. Like there's a good chance you've seen our faces,
Totally. You've seen our faces, and you can probably easily identify our names and who we are. And yeah, we don't need to hide behind this, but like, yeah, to what you were saying, it's just like I so distinctly remember one of my favorite things that a band would do. There's that band Elliott from Louisville, Kentucky. They on Revelation Records, like whatever Midwest emo stuff. But this was obviously pre-internet, but they dressed up in like white shirts and ties and slacks because they wanted to, like, as they were setting up equipment, they wanted people that were not familiar with the band to not just immediately assume like because whatever, you're seeing a guitarist set up an amp with a Madball shirt, you're like, okay, I can probably figure out what they're going to sound like. But they wanted to create this blank canvas. And I thought that was always so cool. I mean, obviously there's no way that you could do that now, but just that idea, I was like, yes, out of principle, this is what they're doing. I mean, I think they gave that up after one record or whatever, but to your point, it's the idea of being like, all right, we made our point. We're doing what we're doing. And like now we don't need to do it anymore, and that's fine.
Yeah, and also as a band, like just the aesthetic of everything you do, like the same way that we decided to do all the artworks ourselves, sometimes working with a photographer here and there, but like always deciding on the artwork ourselves and working on this because the way you present your music is as important as the music itself. Sometimes in the way that if you if you're the kind of band of bros with no shirts on, it says something about what you're gonna say or like how you're gonna act on stage sometimes. But if you're like more like the kind of like timid, shy emo guy, just like looking at his pedals and stuff, it says something different. I guess it's all about the attitude and the way you dress in a way, but that's also like a very the boundary between this and the boys band attitude for me is very slim, very thin, but yeah, I understand what you mean by it's something that struck on you, I guess, with the Elliott, because yeah, it's for me it's very important to present your band the way you want to present it as well, just like talking about the artwork in general.
There you have it. That was Bart Balboa of Birds in Row. Their most recent LP, Griskline, so good. They also just recently put out a split with a band called Coil Guns. Man, I love that thing too. Total collaborative EP. They record 3 songs for this thing, and you could tell that they wrote this together. And I love when bands put their, collective creative energy towards something, and oh man, so good. But anyways, if you, for whatever reason, been like me, you've been on the fence about Birds in Row, just listen to the last LP, Griskline, that came out on Red Creek Recordings, I think. It's the Cult of Luna record label, which, again, I'm obsessed with. Well, not again, but I'm obsessed with. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, listen to them. And thank you very much, Bart, for your time. Love to connect with people internationally, because it's great how much this music scene means to so many people in all corners of the world. Anyways, next week, talk about range. That's why I love this show, to be able to speak to a person like Bart from Birds in Row one week. And then how about Ace Enders from the early November? I don't know about you, but the early November was inescapable during the, aughts and probably tens, I would call it. I mean, I don't know what these eras are called, but the early November, great emo, indie rock bands, pop band, whatever you want to call them. I've always respected the work that they've done, and Ace has been a force of creativity. So when I got the opportunity to pick his brain, I did. And he is such a thoughtful dude. I had a really, really good time with this discussion. So Ace Enders from the early November. That's what's going on next week. Until then, please be safe, everybody. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Trust me in saying that no matter who you are, mental health challenges can affect you, and how you manage them can make all of the difference. That's why everyone should have access to mental health support that meets them where they are and helps them get through. BetterHelp provides online therapy on your schedule. It's flexible, simple to use, and more affordable than in-person therapy. Connect with a licensed therapist selected just for you. Learn more at betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One.
Coming back to Las Vegas.
2 nights.
September 20th and 21st.
On one stage.
Streaming live only on Hulu.
A weekend full of superstar performances.
Never seen before collaborations.
And once-in-a-lifetime artist moments you'll have to see to believe.
Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com.
Don't miss
Big Sean. Camila Cabello. Doja Cat. Gwen Stefani. Hozier. Keith Urban. New Kids on the Block. Paramore. Shabuzi. The Black Crowes. Thomas Rhett. Victoria Monet.
and more.
Don't miss your chance to get tickets to our 2024 iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, right now, before they sell out.
At AXS.com. That's AXS.com.
As the #1 audio company, iHeartMedia gives you access to all. Every audience, live conversations, trusted influencers, and the insights and data you need to grow. iHeartMedia is your access company. Go to iHeartResults.com for more.